All right, so our group did a piece called Where Did All the Animals Go? And we are examining wildlife patterns in cities and increasing biodiversity through architecture and construction. I'm Jaclyn Hazlett. I'm an assistant project manager at Erland Construction, and I'll let the rest of the group introduce themselves.
I'm Emily Belanger. I'm a project manager at Columbia Construction.
Hi, I'm Lizzie Machielse, and I'm a designer at Payette.
I'm Devin Murphy, and I'm a project engineer at Commodore Builders.
And also in our group was Nico, Peik, who unfortunately couldn't make for the presentation today, but will be presenting his portion later on as well.
So starting off with our topic, we kind of took a look at what happened to all the animals and maybe how they interact in the city and where you might see them and how it might look different in the Seaport or in Cambridge, and then also how we can support animals throughout construction. So we chose to come up with 5 questions that we wanted to answer, and that way we could kind of all look at a few different aspects of this and then kind of bring all our different interests into it as well and kind of appeal to a broader range for an audience. So the questions we answered were: what animals can be supported in a high-rise city environment? Can human and animal habitats coexist? How can different urban typologists support wildlife, comparing neighborhoods such as Cambridge versus the Seaport? Can rooftop gardens be an avenue to make cities more sustainable and promote biodiversity? And then how can we maintain and support animal habitats before and during the construction process? And also after, I believe, too, we looked at. So looking at question 1 on what animals can be supported in a high-rise city environment, in doing a little bit of research and then also just looking around, I think everybody kind of sees the squirrels and the ducks and knows about rats and mice and things like that. But something that I personally found interesting was maybe a little bit more on how hawks or falcons and things can survive in a high-rise city environment a little bit more. And just using the warmth of the buildings can help them soar easier, as well as providing good nesting locations for them as well above other prey animals. Yeah, I don't know. Is that the next question? Yeah. Sorry. And just looking at how we can enhance their lives, whether it be not feeding them or not putting out trash at certain times so that they aren't attracted, the wrong animals may not be attracted to that area. You can go to the next question.
All right, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how human and animal habitats can exist. So the coexistence of human and animal habitats is not only accomplishable, but it is essential. Animals provide us with climate control, pest control, pollination, food security. I'm sure there's many other things. As human development and influence have expanded, we've become a threat to our shared environment with animals. So by altering landscapes through burning fossil fuels, deforestation, pollution, and overpopulation. Our actions put many species at risk of extinction, despite some of the adapting and expanding their ranges. Given our awareness of the impact we have on the environment, it's on us to protect our species, protect the species and restore their habitats. So I believe human and animal habitats can coexist if humans are willing to make the necessary changes. So some of the ways that we can coexist with animals, I think just by coexisting with animals and making those changes, we're gonna do better for our climate. They're our food sources. Some of the things that we're doing is, sorry, now I feel like I've lost my train of thought. But we just want to make sure that we're kind of preserving the animal habitat so that we can continue to kind of be a part of a society that has animals in it, since they make up a great deal of what we need as humans in our lives here. So I think we just want to make sure that sorry, I think I have, oh no, I'm back. I don't know where else I've left off. Yeah, so I think that's all I've got, just kind of making those necessary changes.
What do you think are the most important ones of those?
I guess just kind of preserving their habitat, not really going in and taking over, and making sure that we're not the cause of extinction, kind of being wary of where their food comes from and steering clear of it. When we're building, we can make kind of, I think they're called like greenscapes on the buildings, to make it easy for them to coexist with humans.
Yep.
All right. I'm gonna pass it off to Lizzie, and she will just discuss why certain areas have more wildlife. So.
Yeah, thanks, Jaclyn. Yeah, our next question was, we are trying to look at how different urban typologies and different types of neighborhood could support wildlife in different ways. So we did that by comparing 2 different neighborhoods in the Boston area. Oh, could you go back?
Yeah.
Thanks. Cambridge and Seaport. The first time that I went into Cambridge, it feels pretty different than Boston. It's a slightly slower pace and has more low-rise buildings, but what really took me by surprise was the number of turkeys walking around the area. They were just, crossing the street and hanging out around Harvard Square. And it felt pretty strange at first, but it's a pretty cool indicator of a really distinctive quality of Cambridge, that there's so much wildlife in the area. You see a lot more birds and insects, and a lot of bunnies running around even the more densely populated parts of the neighborhood. And then some of the larger parks, like the Alewife Brooks Reservation, has even deer or coyotes or beavers, all kinds of things. And wildlife has really sort of found its home in Cambridge and started to interweave with how humans live, more than other parts of the city. Next slide, please. Sort of on the opposite end of that spectrum is Seaport, which has a lot less interaction with wildlife other than, just seagulls flying around. And this kind of makes sense, right? Seaport's much more densely built, much newer, has fewer parks, and most of the parks are paved for community events. And just generally, there's a lot more noise and light pollution. And this area is getting a lot more fun for people, but new construction should really start to support more biodiversity in the area. Next slide. A lot of studies have shown that urban wilds can be really beneficial to communities. They can help manage stormwater, which will definitely be important in Seaport because of its coastal proximity, and as climate change starts to make more of an impact. It can improve air quality, which would be great in Seaport since it's so heavily trafficked, and can also absorb heat to reduce the urban heat island effect. And just generally having more wildlife can improve health and safety, create higher market values, and just create a stronger sense of community. Next slide, please. If you look at the High Line, for example, an elevated park that goes through the middle of Manhattan and was built on an old railroad. And this railroad is just 30 to 50 feet wide, but has been able to develop a thriving garden that attracts all kinds of different wildlife and a lot of different variety. There are a few different garden zones along the park, some that are much more densely built, like one called the Chelsea Thicket, which has taller trees and taller grasses, and you almost feel like you're walking through a tunnel when you're going through that part. But just a block away, something called the area called the Prairie and 22nd Street Steps zone has plants that are typically found in the Great Plains. So a lot shorter planting, a lot lower to the ground, and it feels very different from the other area, but it still has a huge variety of plants. And they've both been able to find a way to thrive in, relatively little space in a really dense part of the city. And they've successfully brought more bees, butterflies, birds, and other kinds of creatures back to the city. But the question is now, looking at a neighborhood like Seaport, like, can we do this in a neighborhood like that without changing the neighborhood's character too much? And we definitely can. Even if we just use like little parts of, or more concentrated parts of the neighborhood, urban wilds can start to become more of a part of it. You can add more planting to the medians of the roads, and just create or add more variety of plants and meadow flowers and things like that just along the strips of grass along the street. And soon we can start to attract more wildlife like that. But of course, this can be expanded upon by thinking about wildlife during the design and construction process, and not just in retrospect. So we will start to talk about that part of it next, and I'll pass it off to Devin.
Thank you. So, the rooftop gardens environmental impact. Rooftop gardens, they have potential to bring wildlife back into cities, be that through insects, bees, and birds. And it could be a way for us to just blend together the greenery and our urban environment at the same time. And it also, when you're putting together a rooftop garden, just having the greenery on top also provides like a natural heat barrier in a way. A study found that a rooftop, like during the summer, could hit upwards of 158 degrees Fahrenheit, whereas one with greenery on top would be more than less than half that at about 77 degrees. So that would also cut down on energy costs. Next slide, please. And the startup cost for rooftop garden can be anywhere from about $150 to $400 per square meter. So it is a bit costly to get started, but once you have it, there's more benefits. Like the benefits outweigh the costs because you're able to bring back wildlife back into the city where it once was before we came in and just built our cities on top of greenery. And it also provides us with a way to delay storm runoff and try to avoid some flooding inside cities. And it also is good for providing a noise and sound barrier. Next slide, please. So how can we maintain and support animal habitats before and during the construction process? So the way that everything's going now, we're looking to become more sustainable and have less of an impact on the environment. And one of the ways that we can do that is try to preserve as much as we can, but at the same time, reusing and recycling whatever we can to help reduce pollution and our carbon footprint. If we can use wildlife corridors, we can keep existing habitats and link them together to keep like the animals and insects that inhabit that area still in this area. And along with wildlife corridors, we can also use rooftop gardens, which I previously just mentioned. Next slide, please. Through construction, we can take some steps to minimize the disturbance to wildlife. Doing this, we can avoid working during sensitive times, like during breeding seasons, to do our best to avoid affecting the population. And we can also try to provide food and water for wildlife in the area. We can also try to move animals that are displaced by the construction project. Instead of just leaving them in this area, we can try to move them to sanctuary or reserve. And after construction, we can monitor the site to make sure the wildlife is still inhabiting this area, and that we didn't that we didn't like greatly affect the area. All right, next slide.
All right, yeah, just to wrap up real quick. You know, we've started to see urban wilds slowly start coming back into cities. And more buildings and projects are starting to prioritize green space and environmental impacts. But we can continue to take this even further by creating new animal habitats and trying to just increase biodiversity as much as possible. And architects and contractors can play a huge role in promoting these changes throughout the process. You know, doing so, we would really hope to create healthier cities, preserve the environment, protect our cities from climate change, and just help humans and wildlife coexist. We hope you enjoyed hearing a little bit about this and hope that you can help to promote these changes in your future projects.
That's great.
Cool.
So I have a question for the group. From your knowledge of Boston and Cambridge and the metro area, even within Route 128, do you have any one or two favorite spots that are potentials for you that you think of we could do more with introducing the subject of your project there in Reading or in Somerville or in Kenmore Square? You know, like, do you have any particular neighborhoods or towns that you think, boy, this would be wonderful opportunity? This place is just begging for turkeys or something like that. So I'm curious, everybody in the group, what would be your favorite designated neighborhood or building to try to do some of this?
One of the areas I think of.
Oh no, go ahead.
I don't know, is it Cambridge Assembly Row area? I feel like when you go over there, there's like a spot where all the like geese and birds are all just kind of hanging out, but there's nothing really like specifically attracting them. They're just kind of getting pushed there.
Yeah.
But I think kind of making that more, I don't know, enjoyable for them.
What would you do? Like a giant birdhouse or structure or something?
Yeah,
structure where they could build their own.
Feed them and kind of make sure that they're not getting hurt or pushed out of the way.
Yeah.
There was supposed to be a living wall on the partner's garage system.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if that ever made it into the final. No, okay. that got VE'd out. But yeah, okay.
A couple other plum places. Projects going up.
I definitely agree that Assembly Row would be great. Just pretty much any place in the city that currently prioritizes cars a lot. You know, Assembly Row just has a crazy number of intersections and lanes of traffic, which is both inhospitable to pedestrians, but also wildlife. And I think everyone would enjoy hanging out in that area a lot more if there's just more green space, more wild planting, and you know, all of the creatures that come with it as you start to prioritize those kinds of changes. Yeah. There's definitely spots downtown would be great too.
Like,
yeah.
I think Fenway could be another good spot too, because I think within the next 10 years or so, they're going to be redoing that whole area, like surrounding Fenway. So and doing that might be a good opportunity to bring some more green back.
Well, really, because the river comes in and out of there, so it kind of brings things along with it in there. Yeah, interesting.
Also directly adjacent to 7 miles of parkland, so it's a continuous extension of the wildlife corridor.
Yeah.
No, so it just seems easy to just bump off of those. We have the crystal necklace.
Emerald necklace.
Yeah, sorry.
There's a lot of new construction going on in the Boston Landing area, right where that Stop and Shop is in Alston. So
Oh, yeah.
But they're kind of turning it into another seaport. But you know, I think the introduction of greenery and wildlife in that area would help.
Rabbits.
And then, how about like Suffolk Downs? Is that moving forward? Because
Yeah.
that's in East Boston. Is that moving forward? I mean, that's another. I mean, it's literally on a huge wetland, and if there would
Yeah.
be opportunities to integrate that into the East Boston, they've done a good job with the wilds of East Boston, actually.
Yeah.
Leechmere comes to mind to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, Leechmere.
One question I have, and maybe you addressed this and I missed it, so I apologize if that's the case. Are the wilds meant to be like grasses and sort of living plantings that don't require irrigation? Are they just like meant to be like, I know that seems like kind of a weird question, but are they just meant to like be out there and sort of fending for themselves, or is there like an infrastructure that is required with all that,
Great
with the
question.
It's a great question. Yeah.
I think in a lot of ways that would be ideal. Just creating planting that needs relatively little maintenance, would be best for the longevity of it too. I mean, the more that people need to tend to it to keep it going, yeah, the more likely things are going to fall through the cracks, or the harder it is to promote that we get more of it, because that's just more work for people.
Right.
I'm sure there are definitely places where it will kind of be integrated in a more irrigated or maintained landscape. That one photo that we had of Seaport, that paved park in the middle has a few little strips of grass, and a lot of that's used for community events. So that might be a more, if we start to add in more planting there, more little bits of wildlife, that might end up being a more landscaped, or like, I guess like manicured version of that, to sort of maybe fit the activities and the atmosphere that they have there. But yeah, I think ideally as much, as little maintenance as possible, just letting it do its thing, picking resilient plants and letting things kind of just grow on their own.
Yeah, right on.
Thanks for adding the topic to our list of stuff to get us outside just the building part of architecture and construction to the conservation areas too, and the environment. It's a really nice addition to the collection of topics, and it's something that everybody really should be thinking about too. And it's kind of funny too when you think about it. Keep picturing rabbits hopping all over downtown crossing.
Yeah, I feel like I remember in school, like
Garden.
everyone would always ask, like, "Oh, why the green roof?" Like everybody was just like putting green roofs on like all their studio projects, and we always had to like explain why it was like part of the design. But in same, I think what's nice about this is sort of suggesting like it should just be, we're not like explaining the TPO roof, and,
Yeah.
integrating with the concept. I don't know.
Yeah.
It should just be nice if it was standardized in some ways.
Yeah,
Mhm.
really.
I mean, when you think about though, the whole greenway is nothing but a massive green roof,
Yeah.
right? The entire
Yeah.
greenway. And the entire greenway is a great example of an urban wild that is actually doing pretty well and trying to find that balance of wild and not wild. It's doing great. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. Think what that used to feel like before. Did anyone experience it before?
I
It
didn't
was just an
experience it, but I
elevated
can imagine.
highway.
Yeah, I didn't
How-
experience it, but I can imagine the highway was just not fun to walk anywhere
How-
near. So
How many of you have walked the skyline in New York? Show of hands.
Oh, the High Line?
The High Line,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
three or four. If you haven't done it, it's really worth. If you're in the area at all, checking it out, because it'll give you a different perspective on this group's topic. That you really can see that they've done such amazing things with it, especially over time. Because when people first built it, a lot of people were against it because they couldn't imagine that anybody would ever walk on it, and that was wrong, obviously. And it's turned out to be a real showpiece all along the corridor there on that side of the river.
And then since then, they've been connecting almost all the way around Manhattan and almost all the way around Brooklyn now.
Yeah, yeah.
They've gotten nearly, it's not universal, but they have been able to touch almost every single portions of the waterfront.
Yeah.
And make sure that we're creating kind of a green buffer, which I mean, you need just for wetland, stormwater conservation, just for stormwater, for nothing else even.
Yeah.
But you can go beyond that.
Yeah.
And you can take it to the residential end too. When I was teaching in San Diego, we had a faculty member who came in to interview who was talking about wastewater treatment, right? And having it actually produce electricity enough to run its own treatment plant without the chemical side of the treating the effluent before it left. But he was looking at scaling that up to large scale urban situations, but he had already designed and built one that would work at a residential level. So now imagine that that produces its own energy in order to treat the effluent, but then the effluent goes and is pumped up to your rooftop garden to feed the rooftop garden. So not only are you providing cooling, but you're providing energy efficiency and reducing wastewater treatment demand.
Why are we not doing this?
Micro
Interesting.
scale, micro scale.
Interesting.
Everybody wants to go macro. If you go micro scale, it becomes much more feasible.
Where our group has gotten smaller over our 3-hour session, should we stay intact for the discussion part?
Yeah.
The two things.
That's what I was just going to suggest.
Okay.